Hello friends, welcome to the course of Ethics Integrated Aptitude on Awdhesh Academy. Today we are going to start the first lecture of this course, that is, what is the meaning of ethics? This is the most critical question. Now first let us understand what is ethics. The term ethics is derived from the ancient Greek word ethikos or ethos, which means habit or custom. What does it mean? That means ethics is basically something which is a societal creation. It is created by the society. It is passed on from one generation to another generation by the tradition. It is not something which is hard coded. It is not something which is very scientific. It is a matter of custom, traditions and habits. So we can define ethics as the branch of philosophy that involves systematizing, defending and recommending concepts of right and wrong conduct. It means in a society or in a family or in a country, how everybody should behave, what should be the right conduct and what should be the wrong conduct, what we should do and what we should not do. That basically is the meaning of ethics. Now what is the purpose of ethics? Ethics basically investigate the question, what is the best way for the people to live? Ultimately, we all want to live happily, peacefully in a society. So what can be a solution, what can be a method, what can be a lifestyle which if people follow, then they will be living in a peaceful and happy manner. What action we should take which are right or wrong in the particular circumstances? Now, we cannot take a single similar action on every situation. So ethics means we should be able to understand that under a particular circumstances or situation, what is the right course of action. So this is also the matter of ethics. Now ethics actually try to resolve the questions of human morality, and it defines the concepts such as good and evil, right and wrong, virtue and vice, justice and crime. So these are the questions which ethics try to resolve. Now there is no uniformity as far as the definition of ethics is concerned. Different experts have given different definitions. For example, Rushworth Kidder has given the definition that ethics is the science of ideal human character or science of moral duty. That means what should be the character of an ideal human being, that we can call it a ethical character, or that we should follow, and that is the meaning of ethics. Another expert, Richard William Paul and Linda Elder, have defined that ethics is a set of concepts and principles that guide us in determining what behavior helps or harms sentient, that means emotional creatures. It means that when we are performing an act, behaving in a manner, we should actually find out which type of behavior is actually harming the other people and which type of behavior is helping other people. So if we are doing something which is helping other people, it is an ethical behavior, and if we are doing something which is harming other people, it is an unethical behavior. Then there is another definition which is given in the Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy, which says that ethics means the moral principle of a particular tradition, group or individual. That means that a group or society creates what is ethical. For example, in some societies, obeying blindly the dictate or the directions of the parents may be considered ethical, and if you raise any question against that, your behavior may be unethical. But in different societies, it is very much possible that if you argue with the people, argue with the parents and obey only the right orders, then only your behavior is ethical. In the same way, you will find that some traditions allow multiple marriages, while in other traditions only one marriage is allowed. And therefore, if you are in a society where only one marriage is legal and allowed, and if you marry more than one person, then naturally you are committing an unethical act. But the same act may be ethical in another country or in another religion or in another tradition. So it is basically a matter of tradition and which is created by the group or the society. Let us very much understand that ethics is not a science. That is why you will find that ethics is very, very fluid. There is no universal right and wrong which anybody can define. Why? Because no two human beings are same. See, science deals with the inert matter, while ethics deal with living human beings, living in a society. Now, let us take example of water molecule. Now, if you take a glass of water from India, from any river, whether in India or in foreign country or from any other place, you will find that the molecules will behave in identical manner. The boiling point of the pure water will be 100 degrees, freezing point will be 0 degrees, its behavior will be 100% same. Same way, behavior of the air, behavior of the oxygen and all inert matter will remain same. Therefore, science basically deals with the inert matter, and so it can frame the law which are universally applicable. Unlike that, when we are talking about ethics, ethics deal with human beings, and human beings basically are not same. Even within the same family, two siblings have very different behavior. One person can be extremely good, other person can be extremely bad. When you change the society, when you migrate from one society to another society, you will find that the societal values are different. For example, corruption may be very high in India, but corruption may be very low in a country like Switzerland. So this is something which varies from country to country. Within the country also, from organization to organization, from family to family, from religion to religion, you will find variation in the behavior of the people. And therefore, we cannot frame any universal code of ethics. A person can be good and bad at the same time. A bad person can become good and a good person can become bad. And therefore, it's not that gold will exhibit the same property. Human being can be the worst of the person and also can become best of the person. And that is why Oscar Wilde said it very wisely that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future, because from sinner we can become a saint, and even a saint has a bad past. It is quite possible. You might be familiar with the story of Maharshi Valmiki. He was not Maharshi from the beginning. Initially, he was a bandit who used to loot the people who were passing through the jungle. So what happened that once some saints were passing there and he wanted to loot them. Then the saint said, okay, you can take whatever we have, but we have a question. And the question is that, do you know that it is a sin to loot people? Then Valmiki said, yes, I know, but this is my profession. When I loot the people, from that money, I fulfill the need of my family. I brought up my family because of that. Then the saint said, your family is very much sharing your wealth, but will they share your sin also? Then Valmiki was very confident. He said, yes, why not? Then the saint said, okay, go and check up. If they are willing to share your sin also, then please take everything what we have, but let us know whether they are willing to share your sin. Then Valmiki went back to his family and he has consulted his family member and asked each member of family whether he is willing to share his sin. And every family member said, no, we are not willing to share your sin. You are committing the sin and therefore you only have to take the blame for the sin. Then Valmiki realized the mistake. Then he went back to the saint and sought his forgiveness. The saints told them to actually seek forgiveness from God, and thereafter he has become very religious and he wrote the book Ramayana, which is one of the greatest scripture of India. So you can see in this case that a bandit transformed into a good human being and became one of the greatest saint because he got the right knowledge. So what is the lesson of this story? The lesson of the story is that people normally commit the evil deeds because of their ignorance or because of their false knowledge. If people have the right knowledge, then they will not commit any wrong deeds. And the people having wrong knowledge cannot do any right things. If you do not do the things rightly, how can you do right things? So the knowledge of right and wrong, good and evil is very, very important for us to lead a good life. And when all people in the society become ethical, do the right thing, then the society becomes peaceful and a happy society. What are the different sources of ethics? Ethics come from different sources like religion, rules and laws of the country, culture and tradition. It comes from families and friends. It comes from school and from colleges, from teachers, and it also comes from our rational way of thinking. If we think rationally, then we can appreciate the importance of ethics, and even without the support of religion, even without something said in the religion, we can follow an ethical path. Let us understand that every human being has basically two aspects. One we can call a lower aspect and one we can call a higher aspect. In the lower aspect, we are similar to any other animal. And in the lower aspect, what happens that we live to fulfill the desire of our body, we enjoy the pleasure, sensation, and we care for our own happiness. And we exploit every opportunity so that our self-interest is fulfilled. That is the lower aspect of the human being. But there is a higher aspect also. The higher aspect is when you listen to the voice of your soul and then you try to take care of the whole world. You consider the world as the one family. You think about the benefit of other people rather than thinking about the benefit of yours. And when you listen to the voice of your conscience and when you work according to your ideals. So these are the things which actually comes because of our higher self. And we have both. We can say a physical self, a spiritual self, we have both. So when we listen to the voice of our soul, when we follow the high ideals, then we are doing an ethical job. And when we are selfish, we are doing an unethical job. And that is what is the difference between ethical and unethical behavior of a person. So I hope that you have been able to understand the meaning of ethics today, and you will be able to understand that if you have the right knowledge of the ethics, then we can also lead an ethical life in our future. Friends, today we are going to learn about the determinants of ethics. What are the different factors which determine the ethical values of a person? So the factors that determine the ethical conduct of a person are called the determinants of ethics. There are different types of factors which actually influence the ethical value of the person, and these factors are as following: 1. Person, 2. Place, 3. Law, 4. Organization, 5. Religion, and 6. Time. Now these are not the exhaustive list of the factors which influence the ethical value of the person. These are only the demonstrative list, but they will cover most of the ethical values of the person. So let us know them one by one. The first important factor is person. Friends, every human being is unique and he possesses a different types of attributes. Even when a child is born, he is born with a particular nature. And then when he grows, depending upon the upbringing or nurture, he develops or she develops certain qualities in her life. So the ethical value of two real brothers or sisters or siblings in the same family, brought up by the same parents, may be different because their inherent nature is different. So ultimately, the ethical value of a person depends on the nature as well as the nurture. People acquire their ethical values from their parents, teachers, elders, depending upon the nature and experience. So when they go to the schools, they learn something from the teachers. They often make their parents or teachers as the role model. They learn from them, but sometimes they learn different things. It is not necessary that if your parents are ethical, you will be ethical. Or it is also not necessary that if your parents are unethical, you will be unethical, because ultimately you may either imitate their values or you may rebel and do something else. We have seen many cases where the children of honest parents have become unethical, while the children of dishonest persons become ethical because they have learned the pros and cons of their parents' behavior, and therefore they have adopted their behavior according to their nature. Similarly, in the schools and colleges, when we go, then the peer pressure plays a very, very important role in shaping our ethical values. If you get into the bad company, you tend to develop very negative values, but if you get into good companies, you tend to develop many ethical values. So friends, this is about the person. Second is about the place. Culture, tradition, and values of a society and country plays a very important role in shaping ethical values. Friends, the country in which we are born, there is already certain values over there, and that plays very important role in shaping our own values. Ethical values vary greatly in each country and indeed in each society. For example, corruption is very common in India, but not so common in many developed countries, for example, Singapore. So if you are born in Singapore, you will tend to hate the people who do corruption, because corruption is considered to be a very bad thing, a very evil thing, or a very negative trait as far as Singapore is concerned. But in India, you will find that corruption becomes a way of life, and therefore what happens that many people tend to adopt these values as they grow up. However, everything is not bad in India. For example, in Western societies, you will have live-in relationships, adultery, extramarital and premarital relationships and affair. These things are very common in those societies, and therefore if you are born in those societies, there is a huge chance of adopting those unethical values. But if you are in India, there is very less chance that you will be falling into these unethical values. So the place where you are born, the place where you are brought up, that also shapes your ethical values. The next important determinant of the ethics is law. The government of a state makes law that prohibits certain actions and allows other actions. Therefore, the law decides the concept of right and wrong for the citizens. Because if you do the wrong things, you are likely to be punished by the law, and therefore you avoid doing those negative things and ultimately end up doing more positive things which are in compliance with the law. So law guides the citizens to follow the right path. For example, the laws relating to the prohibition of sati made tremendous impact on the sati pratha. In the same way, the laws relating to intercaste, interreligion marriages or prohibition of dowry, divorce provisions, they have transformed the ethical values of the society. In the same way, the Supreme Court recently declared Section 377 of IPC unconstitutional, and thereby it has given the boost to the LGBT rights. In the same way, the Supreme Court judgment regarding the triple talaq and the Sabrimala is likely to transform the values of the society in future, because they have empowered the women, and therefore it is bound to have transformative effect on the society and the ethical values of the people. In addition to the person or the place, the organization also plays a very important role in shaping the ethical value of the person. Because every organization has a culture of its own, and people tend to mold their values to fit into the organizations. For example, the ethical values of the employees of the government sectors, politicians, corporates, and the public sector units vary, because each of these organizations have different work culture. But within the same type of organization, like the government organization, you will find that the values will differ from one government department to another government department. For example, the ethical values of a police officer will be different than the ethical value of an employee of a hospitality sector, even though the same may be in the government department. In order to understand how an organization shapes the value of a person, we shall learn about the Stanford prison experiment. This is one of the very important experiments which has shown how people get change once they join a particular organization. And this experiment actually explains why the police officers become very sadist or cruel or inhuman in the perception of the people. So this particular experiment was conducted by Philip George Gimbrado, who was a psychologist and a professor emeritus at Stanford University, and this was conducted in the year 1971. He picked up 24 male students to participate in a psychological study of prison life. The experiment was conducted in a makeshift prison located in the basement of Stanford psychology department. Now, half of them were randomly assigned the role of a prisoner, and the remaining half were to act as a prison guard. Initially, the prisoners did not take the guards seriously. Soon the guards began to impose their authority. When the prisoners refused to obey, the guard used power against them. The next day, the prisoner rebelled, and guard imposed their authority forcefully to giving them punishment. Within a few days, the students who were merely acting as guards began to behave like real prison guards and became sadistic. On the other hand, the students who were playing the role of prisoner became extremely stressed and developed symptoms of acute depression. The experiment was originally planned for 2 weeks but has to be called off within 6 days due to its extreme effect on participants. So here we saw that even though the people were randomly selected and they were only playing the role of the prisoner or the prison guard, but once they were put in that surrounding, within a couple of days their behavior changed, and the people who are playing the role of the police guard, they become very sadist, they become tough, and those who are playing the role of prisoners become very depressed, just like the actual prisoner. So if so much of transformation can happen in such a short period of time, what happens if you join the organization for life? Naturally, it transforms your ethical values. The next important determinant of ethics is religion. Most people in the world are religious and believe in God. They are basically the people who believe in the right and wrong, which is provided in their scriptures. And every scriptures provide what is right and what is wrong. And if you believe on that particular religion and if you're a follower of that religion, you cannot ignore that. For example, alcohol is prohibited in Islam, but it is permitted in Christianity. So most of the Muslims avoid taking alcohol while most of the Christians actually take it. In the same way, the Hinduism divides the people based on caste in a rigid hierarchy, and therefore you will find that people discriminate other people on the basis of caste. This is wide prevalent. Divorce was earlier not allowed in Hinduism, but it was always permitted in Christianity and Islam. And this has an impact on the low rate of divorces which is there in Hinduism. Islam permits 4 marriages by males and provide for triple talaq, and that has undermined, or that has basically changed the relationship between the husband and wife because of the religion. And so you will find that religion plays a very, very important role in shaping the ethical values. In other religion, if suppose somebody marry another lady or marry more than one person, it will be considered unethical, but not in Islam because the religion provides for it. So religion is one of the very important determinant of ethical value. And finally, the ethical values are a product of time. It keeps changing from one time to another time. So ethical values are not something which is hard-coded in stone. They are transformative, they are basically evolutionary, and they keep changing with time. What was ethical in the ancient or the medieval period is no more considered to be ethical in the modern period. For example, it was ethical to conduct war in the ancient and medieval time for whatever reasons. Nobody questioned why the king has waged a war, but it is considered to be immoral in the modern time. It was considered immoral to be gay in the ancient time, but it is considered to be permissible in the modern time. It was unethical for a man and woman to marry against the wishes of their parents in the ancient time. The parents used to decide everything, but this particular thing has become ethical today. So even if your parents don't agree, but if the boy and girl want and if they marry, it is considered to be an ethical act. In the earlier time, the parents arranged the marriage of their children even against their will, and that was perfectly legal, that was perfectly ethical. But today, such practices will be considered unethical and even send the parents to jail if they force their will on their children. So I hope that you have got the concept of the determinants of the ethics. There can be more determinants also because these are not the exhaustive list. However, this provides fairly good idea about the factors which influence our ethical values. Friends, today we are going to discuss about the dimensions of ethics. We can also call it types of ethics. How many dimensions are there of ethics? So let's understand this today. But before we proceed, let us understand what is ethics. Friends, we know that ethics deals with basic concepts and fundamental principles of good human conduct. That means, what are the basic principles on the basis of which we can lead a good life? So if you want to have a good life, if you want to have a good conduct, what are the basic concepts and principles? Here we studied the universal values that are necessary for living a good life in this world. Now the same concepts are also given by religion, because religions also tells you what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad. These are also part of the religion, but these are supposed to be the words of God, and therefore they cannot change with time and situation. Another very important thing is that religions doesn't have to explain why something is good or why something is bad. They will simply state, and because it is supposed to be the words of God, people will follow. The flip side is that it cannot be changed. So today suppose we find that certain values has become outdated, then we cannot change because scriptures cannot be changed. Unlike that, in ethics, the concept of right and wrong are based on logical discussions, evidence and investigations. So in ethics, we cannot say something to be right or wrong unless we are able to provide some logic for it. We discuss why something is good or bad. We provide some evidence in the form of studies and all that, and then only we can say if something is right or wrong. And therefore, the concept of ethics keep changing with time. As the time changes, so the concepts of ethics changes. What was ethical, say, a couple of centuries ago is no more ethical today, and what is unethical today was perhaps ethical in the previous time, because ethics keep on changing. So what are the different dimensions of ethics? There are 4 dimensions of ethics. The first dimension is metaethics. It examines the origin and meaning of ethical principles. From where the ethical principles are coming, that is studied in metaethics. The second dimension is called descriptive ethics. It deals with people's belief about what is morally right and wrong. So we find out from people as to what they consider is right, what they consider is wrong. So for example, let us say live-in relationship. There was a time when it was considered to be very bad, but today it is acceptable in many parts of the world. In the same way, let us say love marriage or marrying without the concurrence of parents. There was a time when people used to consider it very wrong, but today it is acceptable. So descriptive ethics basically find out as to what is considered to be right or wrong in the society's context. The third dimension is called normative ethics. It is basically the study of the ethical actions in a given situation. And that basically is prescriptive in nature. It will tell you that under the given situation, what should be done. And the fourth dimension is applied ethics. It involves the examining the specific controversial issues relating to ethics in society. For example, issues like environment, deforestation, abortion, and things like that. So those are the issues which are examined in applied ethics. We'll discuss about all the 4 dimensions in detail in the subsequent lessons. Now, as far as the metaethics is concerned, metaethics can be divided into 2 issues. The first is called metaphysical issues. The second is called psychological issues. Metaphysics can be further divided into 2 categories, absolutism and relativism. So all these things we will be discussing separately in different lessons. When we are discussing about ethics, sometimes the question comes whether ethics are universal in nature or whether ethics are relative in nature. If suppose ethics are universal, then the same practice or same ethics should be applicable all over the world on every person. And if it is relative, then no 2 people can agree to the same concept of ethics. But the fact is that there are certain principles in ethics which we can say are universal in nature. For example, you should not kill a person, you should not steal, you should not lie. So there are many principles which we can say are almost universal, but there are many ethical principles relating to marriages, relating to relationships, are basically something which is relative in nature. So today we are going to learn about what is absolute concept of ethics and what is relative concept of ethics. So let's take first the metaethics. Metaethics is made of two words, meta, which means beyond or actually above, and ethics, that means what is beyond ethics. It means basically why ethics exist at all, means the origin of ethics, the cause of ethics. So that falls in the category of metaethics. Metaethics can therefore be defined as the study of the origin and the meaning of ethical concepts. It basically covers two broad issues. One is metaphysical issues and other is psychological issues. And we will first take the metaphysical issues where these absolute and relative concepts of ethics falls. Now, what are the metaphysical issues? The metaphysical issues means it's a division of philosophy that is concerned with the fundamental nature of reality and being. That means how a reality is being created. It's like a human being. How a human being has been created, how the life has originated. So that is something which is dealt in the metaphysical issues. It deals with the matter which is beyond the objective experience. For example, we know a human being, we can measure his weight, we can measure his IQ, but we do not know why it is so. That means how a human being has been created or how this bird has been created. So that basically means that which is beyond the objective experience means what we can see. So what is the subjective experience? That is what is metaphysical issues. Now the metaphysical issues can also be divided into two categories. One is absolutism and second is relativism. So let us understand what is this. Now first concept is absolutism. Absolutism, we can compare that a living being like a human being has basically two parts. One is his body, which is mortal, which is born, which dies, and we have soul, which is basically considered to be an eternal thing. That means it never is born and it never dies. And people compare often soul with God because it is as eternal or as universal as God. So just like a soul is the essence of a living being, which is divine, absolute and eternal, some people believe that ethics is also something which is like a soul, which is universal, absolute, eternal, spiritual, otherworldly and divine like God. And they believe that it is basically something which is self-created by God and it is not a human creation. We can experience the presence of soul, but we can't actually know the reason for its existence. In the same way, we can feel that these ethical principles are necessary, but we actually cannot prove or disapprove it because it is beyond the comprehension of human mind. It is created by God. This is the meaning of absolutism. That means ethical principles are absolute, irrefutable, universal, and it cannot be disputed. And since it is basically divine and universal, therefore we realize it from within. Sometimes, this is called voice of soul, sometimes it is called voice of our conscience, sometimes it is called inner voice. That means basically we are born with these ethics and these things comes from inside. And Plato, for example, who is considered to be one of the greatest philosophers in the world, he believed that the moral and ethical values are basically divine and we must try to follow them as a matter of law. The Indian concept of dharma is also very akin to the concept of absolutism because it also believes that there are universal principles which are necessary to be followed if we want the society to survive, and these are created by God and we cannot create it by our own volition. Unlike that, there is another concept which is called relativism. Now, what is the meaning of relativism? The relativism basically means that ethics is this worldly. That means it is a creation of human mind and therefore it is always very subjective. And the people who follow the relativism believe that the moral values keep changing with time and society. It is different for every society. So what is the moral value in India, for example, cannot be the moral value in China or cannot be the moral value of America. So it varies. Even within the India, the moral values which existed say 1000 years ago have no relevance as of now. So the people who follow relativism are also called skeptics. Skeptics means one who questions or one who is suspicious about every ethical value. That means they question every ethical value, and they are also called skeptics. Now, skeptics do not reject the moral values. They don't say that stealing is good, or they don't say that killing is good. They accept it, but they say that it is basically not something which is divine, but it is something which is human in nature. It has been created by human mind and it is subjective. And therefore, what is subjective means it can vary from time to time, from place to place, from situation to situation. And the philosophers of this kind are called moral relativism. But now, within the moral relativism also, there are basically two types of moral relativism. The first type of moral relativism is called individual relativism. Now, let's understand what is the meaning of individual relativism. The individual relativism basically means is that we as a human being, we create our own moral standards. For example, if suppose there is a person who is a poor person and there is a person who is a rich person, their moral standards will be different. There is a person who is basically an intelligent person, there is a person who is not so intelligent, their moral standard may be different. That means basically depending upon our own convenience, depending upon what suits us, we create the moral standards. So this view believe that individual morality depends on what suits you best. One of the very prominent philosopher who actually preached this theory was Nietzsche. He believed that the great people create their own moral values that are quite distinct and in reaction to the slave-like values of the masses. That means if you see the values of the people who are great, more successful, their values are very much different than the values that are followed by the masses. Unlike that, there is another second view that is called cultural relativism. Now, cultural relativism basically means that the basic principles of morality are decided by the society through evolutionary process. That means it is not the individual who decides what is moral and what is not moral, but it is decided by the evolutionary process. So it has a history of the things, and that is the reason that the moral values are very different in different countries. So the believer of the cultural relativism believe that basically the moral principles are not individual's creation. You cannot create your own moral principles. Your moral principles need the approval of the society. We are bound by the values of the society. Our values has to be in conformity with the value of the society. So we have found that there are two types of relativism, individual relativism and cultural relativism. So I believe that basically both things influence in forming our moral standards. Some we decide of our own and some we are actually influenced by the values of the society. So today we have learned about two types of ethical standards. One we can call absolute standards, one we call relative standard. They are called relativism and absolutism. And we have understood that there are different opinions between the two. But I believe that basically our ethical values are a combination of the two. Just like a body or a human life is a combination of both body and soul, and they are basically complementary to each other. In the same way, the relative values and the absolute values both exist side by side, and both are important in evolution of our ethical standard. We are learning about the metaethical concepts of ethics. We have earlier learned about the metaphysical concept. That means whether the ethics comes from some divine source, whether it is actually inbuilt into our genes, or it is something which is actually created by us human beings. We have learned that ethics can be absolute and ethics can also be relative. Today we are going to learn the second concept, that is about the psychological issues in metaethics. So what is the meaning of psychological issues of metaphysics? We see in the real world, there are some people who are very ethical and there are some people who are not ethical. Even within the same family, we can find one brother may be ethical, another brother may not be ethical. In the same organization, you will find very, very honest people and you will also find very dishonest people. Now, why? If ethics is really a good way of living the life, then why some people are ethical and why some people are unethical? So that is a very, very important concept. That means what is the reason for somebody to become ethical? So when we are talking about the psychological issues of metaethics, then we are fundamentally asking why you should be ethical. Whether you should be ethical because it gives you joy, it gives you pleasure, it gives you happiness, it gives you satisfaction, or you are ethical because you don't want to be boycotted by the society, you don't want to face the punishment, you don't want to go to jail. What is the real meaning of ethics? Why we are ethical? That is the fundamental question we are going to discuss today. There are different psychological concepts which explain why we are ethical. The first important one is egoism. Egoism means that people are inherently selfish. We do everything because that gives us joy. Even when we help other people mainly because we feel happy while helping other people. If that does not happen, then we are not going to even help other people. So that is the first important theory, and that is called egoism. The second important theory is called altruism. Now, the meaning of altruism is that we are basically a connected people. We are a social animal and we want to live in a society and we derive happiness while actually helping other people. So, we have a natural tendency to feel sympathy and empathy. So, when somebody is in trouble, we feel bad about it and we want to actually take care of that person. In the same way, we naturally feel the pain of other people, that is empathy. And it is because of that we want to help other people. So the meaning of altruism is that we are connected with other people and it is our natural desire to help other people. That is basically the meaning of altruism. So there is a very beautiful Swedish proverb that says shared joy is a double joy, shared sorrow is a half sorrow. That means when we are sharing our joy with other people, our joy multiplies. What is the meaning of feeling happiness alone? Only when you have people to share your joy, you can really enjoy happiness. In the same way, if we have friends and if we can share our pains and sorrow with them, then we feel relieved and our sorrow becomes half. So that is how we are designed. So the meaning of altruism is that we have a natural tendency to share our joy and sorrow. And this is something which has been very widely discussed in all the scriptures in the religion, where we are told that we should try to help other people, we should try to take care of the poor people, and that is the meaning of altruism. That means man is not inherently selfish, as the egoist people say. He is actually having a tendency to help other people, and we can say that this is altruistic nature of the person, that we derive happiness while helping other people. Other than that, there is also a theory which says that actually whatever we do is because of our emotions. That means when we are doing something, it is because we feel happy doing it. It is the feeling of doing it that is most important. So if we don't feel happy while helping other people, then we will not do it, whatever may be the theory. And this theory says that emotions are prime. And ultimately when we do something, it is because of the emotion, and we discover the logic and reason later on. So this is very important, that man is driven by emotions and we derive the reasons and logic later on. And that's why a famous philosopher Hume has said that reason is and ought to be the slave of passion. That means it is the passion which rules a human mind and the reason is a servant of that. But then that is not the final theory, because we have another great philosopher and his name was Immanuel Kant. he believed that actually people are ethical because of their reasons. While the emotions are temporary, emotions come for a short time, but reasons carries on. Emotions are subjective, but your reasons are actually durable and it's objective. So if something is logical, something is reasonable, then you will find that many people will accept that logic. And in fact, Immanuel Kant has been able to derive almost all the ethical principles by simply using reason. These things we will be discussing in the later chapter in detail. So today we have learned about the psychological aspect of ethics. We have understood that ethics is not something which is divine, which is inbuilt into our code, but there are psychological advantages and psychological reasons of becoming ethical. If we are ethical, then we derive a psychological satisfaction, and unless we derive psychological satisfaction, it's very difficult to become ethical. We will discuss today about the descriptive ethics. This type of ethics is also called comparative ethics. So let's proceed to understand what is the meaning of descriptive ethics. Descriptive ethics is basically the study of the people's belief about morality. Friends, the concept of morality is not rigid. It is not frozen in time and space. It keeps changing with time. For example, in the earlier time, there were many things which were ethical, which are not considered to be ethical today. For example, the role of women. They were supposed to be at their home. They were supposed to cater to their family. But today, they are coming out and working in the society. In the earlier time, if the man and woman stays together without marriage, it was considered to be unethical. But today, live-in relationship has become very, very common. So the idea is that the concept of morality keeps changing on time. And we should understand as to what people think about morality rather than judging the morality of the people based on thousands of years of old belief. And for this purpose, we do an empirical research. That means we take the view of the people, and after that empirical research, we find the attitude of the individual or group to ascertain what people consider moral. Now, morality does not vary only from one country to another country. Even within the same country, the morality may vary. The morality of Delhi and the morality of a place in Bihar, for example, let us say Begusarai, or a place in Patna or in Balia, in UP, they may be totally different. So, that we do by help of empirical research and find out as to what they consider ethical. It investigates basically the actions which societies reward or punish. That means if somebody is doing, let us say, live-in relationship, whether society award that or society punish. Let us say somebody does intercaste marriage or marriage against the wishes of the parents or love marriage. In that situation, what is the behavior of the society, whether society award or punish. So these are the things which basically we try to ascertain and find out what people consider ethical or unethical. It is basically dynamic because moral values keep changing with time and place. And therefore, we have to keep on finding out as to what people consider moral in nowadays. Now, what are the different features of descriptive ethics? Now, descriptive ethics basically provides authentic empirical information about what is considered ethical by the society. We cannot be governed by the earlier standards of the society. There was a time when the model people to follow or the role model were for women, for example, Sati Savitri Sita, or for male it was, let us say, Lord Ram or Yudhishthir or like that. But time has changed, and so let's find out as to what people consider moral in today's context. Now, instead of judging whether an action is ethical or an unethical action based on the logic which has been given by the philosophers long ago, sometime thousands of years ago, it rather take into account the ground reality of the society and provide the true picture of morality as of now. So this is much more relevant because it will tell you what is considered to be moral or immoral in today's context. Descriptive ethics tells us which actions are moral based on the popular perception within the society rather than what ought to be. So it is based on the reality. So many of the moral standards which has been set up thousands of years ago in the time of Mahabharata, Ramayana, Gautam Buddha, or in the time of Socrates and Jesus Christ may not be moral today. So what is moral today? That we try to find out from the descriptive ethics. So what we do after we found out what is moral, what should be the benefit of the descriptive ethics. Now once the philosophers ascertain as to what is ethical from society's point of view, they can also find out the reasons to justify the prevalent social behavior. So once you know that something is considered to be moral or immoral, then you try to find out as to why it is moral or immoral. And therefore what happens that it helps the philosopher coming up with newer theories of ethics that are in tune with times. And that is why philosophy is a living discipline. Ethics is a living entity. And with time, we must keep on changing to make it relevant for the present time. So descriptive ethics involves empirical investigations, and therefore it is used in different scientific fields like evolutionary biology, psychology, sociology, or anthropology. In all these different branches, in different disciplines, the descriptive ethics plays a very, very important role because it is based on scientific investigation, empirical research, and therefore the data can be used for various purposes. So friends, today we have learned about descriptive ethics. It is very, very important part of ethics because it tells you as to what is ethical in today's context. Thank you very much.